Hello, everyone. My name is Siyu. I'm from Indiana University, Bloomington. And today it's really my pleasure to be here to present on the evolution and analysis of conceptual referential communication. So referential communication is a very complex form of social interaction that can be found among collaborative insects, birds, and mammals. So this is the idea that these agents have the ability to communicate something that's not immediately present to the conversation. For example, honeybees, they can dance to each other and communicate a location of flowers that they want to predate that's far away from their hive. And we humans also love flowers, and we might chat about a lavender field to visit around Sapporo. That's not immediately present here. So Williams, Spear, and Gasser have proposed a way of modeling referential communication based on coordinate behavior. So according to this approach, communication is a behavior between agents that determines the future behavior of the receiver in a way that is constrained by the properties of the referent. And communication is referential when communication happens somewhere like spatially or temporally away from the referent. This is also the approach we are adopting and try to enrich. So basically, in the literature, there's a common way of modeling referential communication. This is to evolve agents to map communicated information to a behavior, just one behavior that sufficiently completes the task. This is like if I tell you to visit the lavender field, you might just develop a way of following a route to a designated position in Furano to see the lavender. And this is often inspired by honeybee dancing, where what is communicated is a location where that the bee has to go to. But now I have to confess that I'm a black sheep here. I'm a philosopher of science, and I always question and analyze concepts and their instantiation by models. So this can be annoying sometimes, I know, but occasionally it's also going to generate some productive thing with modeling. So for this approach, I feel that it's a little bit away from many types of communication we have in everyday life. Like when I tell you to visit the lavender field, I'm not fixing it to one position or one route or one time to go there, but actually the audience has the ability to determine where, when, and how to see a lavender field. So here, this old approach seems to miss some important aspect of behavioral flexibility we can find in many daily life communication. So also we can ask a lot of questions when we use this old mode, for example, how to distinguish communication from just manipulating an object, and how is it possible for the receiver to take a more active role in deciding how to use the information and how to adapt to environmental changes. So to answer these questions, we propose a new mode of referential communication. We call it the conceptual referential communication. In this mode, the agents communicate not a behavior, but a label of the referent. The label distinguishes the referent from the rest of the environment, but it's not designating the behavior to perform. For this type of communication, we expect the agents can, especially the receiver, can decide how to behave in a specific environment. And we hope that the receiver can adapt to different environments. This is like to say, visit the lavender field without fixing like which lavender field to go to and how to go there. So now I'm going to introduce the models for our conceptual referential communication. This is a proof of concept of being possible to evolve agents to do this kind of task. So this is a model that is extended from past work by Williams et al. And Manica. First, we have two agents, the sender and the receiver, and they both move on the edge of the ring. Both agents have two angular sensors to sense each other's motion when they enter the sensing area of these agents. And both of them have a label sensor that can sense the labels. For the sender, it uses the label sensor to sense a target label. That is the label it is trying to communicate to the receiver and let the receiver go to. And the receiver knows things about the environment. It senses the label of the position, the sector it's currently in the environment. So we have first a 2-label task and a 3-label task. For the 2-label task, we have first a nest label, which indicates the area for communication, and 2 flower labels, daisy and iris. And for the 3-label task, we add another flower label called peony. And the agents are made of continuous time recurrent neural networks. There are 5 interneurons. When they receive the sensor input, they compute and then give outputs to the motors that help the agents move on the ring. This is the setting of the task. First, there is a communication stage with 300 time steps. The sender and receiver can move freely on the ring so that the sender can communicate the label to the receiver. And after the time, the sender is removed and the receiver is placed on the carrier environment at the middle of the nest section, and then it can move around in the environment to either go to daisy sector or iris sector, or first explore a little bit and then go to each sector. The agents are evaluated based on the proportion of time the receiver spends in the correct sector during the last 200 time steps, and we have several trials to evaluate this fitness. We also in these several trials, we permute the labels of the sectors so that the receiver is forced to perceive the environment instead of just following a designated behavior that's that it receives from the communication. So it has to know something about the environment before it can complete the task. For the 3-label task, we had a peony section here. So everything else is very similar, and we have more environmental sightings because there are more ways to permute the environment. So this is how we evolved agents and our results. We evolved time constants, biases, and connection weights. And for the 2-label task, it's quite easy. All 10 of 10 agents got a fitness of 1. And for the 3-label task, it's apparently more difficult, and only 3 out of 30 got a fitness of 1. So we just took the agents with fitness 1 for analysis in the next. So to analyze the agents, we want to answer 3 questions. First, how do the agents communicate the label? How is communicated information stored, especially in the receiver? And how is information, both from communication and from the environment, used by the receiver? We'll now first go into the 2-label task and then the 3-label task. So how do the agents communicate the label? Here I plot several 3D graphs. It is the positions of the 2 agents extended in time. And we can see several patterns here. So first is that the 2 agents distance from each other all over the time. So it produces no sensor activation in the sensors. And another approach is to cross each other several times, like these 2. They produce several activation spikes in the sensors. And the other approach is to circle around together. So there's an extended activation in the sensor states. So the agents communicate in the circular environment by changing their periods, phases, and directions of circling the environment, and it produces different patterns of spikes in the sensors. Now, how is communicated information stored? Here I plot, this is again the sensor activation graph extended in time. And this is, I picked 2 interneurons to analyze because they are more sensitive to the sensor's changes. And we see that every time there's a spike, it adjusts, the solid line is when the target label is daisy, and the dashed line is when the target label is iris. So every time there's a spike, in the iris case, there's a small change in the interneuron activation state, so that the numbers of spikes, sensory spikes, changes the activation state of interneurons, so that it makes a difference at the end of the communication stage. So this small difference is actually how the agents use to store and remember and distinguish different labels. So next, how is information used by the receiver? So first, we have to know that the receiver is using 2 types of information, one from communication and the other from the environment. Let's look at the environment, the use of environment information first. So these are dash line and the solid line are two agents that they all want to find Daisy, but they go into different environment. The solid line goes into Iris first and then Daisy, and the dash line goes into Daisy first and then staying there. So we see an initial split in their activation states. This is how they, when they try to find the same label, but goes into different environments. So environment label is triggering opposite reactions to the label. And what about the target labels? So we remember there's a small difference in the initial activation state. And this small difference persists over time. And this is receiver finding, the solid line is receiver finding Daisy, and the dash line is receiver finding Iris. So you see that the small difference is persisting over time, so that it makes, again, a small difference in their motor system. So one receiver goes into Daisy and stay there, and the other continues moving to go into Iris. So this is how the motor systems are working. Like the solid line here comes to a stop in the Daisy section, and the dash line continues moving into the Iris section. But this reaction is very small, but it's sufficient. But we will see something different in the three-label task. So going to the three-label task, how they communicate is very similar in the way to the two-label task. That is, again, by distancing from or crossing or accompanying each other to produce different patterns of sensory spikes. But something different here is that because there's a need to communicate three labels, it's a little bit hard, and they have to move with more variations. And also here we see that the receiver is moving in different patterns in reaction to what the sensor was doing. So it's more mutually fitting instead of just the sender taking different patterns to let the receiver know what is going on, but actually the two are interacting with each other in some way. And what is more interesting in the three-label task is that we found, because there's higher need to distinguish labels, the labels are the interneurons are used in a more efficient way in storing these labels. So I plot the labels in the 3D space of 3 interneurons, and you can see that each label differs from one another in at least one edge. So this means that they differ from each other in at least the activation or deactivation of one neuron. So it's very like a type of binary coding. This is more drastic compared to how agents use very small differences to store information in the two-label task. And finally, this radical way, this efficient way of using interneurons also lead to more distinct ways of reaction to environment. So here we see that when the agents go into the Daisy section, the motor drastically goes down. And when this dash agents go into the Iris section, which is the correct section for it, the motor also goes down drastically, and the motors are not changing much when they're in the wrong section, in the wrong sector. So it seems that the agents are more sensitive because they are representing the labels in a more efficient way. So to conclude, we propose a new concept of a new mode of referential communication we call conceptual referential communication, and we develop a computational model for it. And our finding is that the agents use both information from communication and the environment to behave, and this can be highly structured when the task is more difficult, like they use binary coding and they react in opposite ways to different environmental labels. We believe that this this mode of communication is very interesting because there are a lot of directions to go into in the future. For example, we can perform an information theoretic analysis beyond just behavioral analysis. And it's also interesting that we found some natural counterparts in existing literature about bee communication, like the past models focus more on honeybees, but the bumblebees are actually communicating in a more conceptual way. They communicate an order instead of a location. So this makes it possible for those bumblebees to find like flowers at different places that has the same order. And it's also possible for individual bees to use its own experience with the environment. So there's apparently an evolutionary trade-off between specificity of communication and the efficiency of finding the target. And this model can be used to study this type of natural phenomena. And we expect also more complex designs, such as a 2D environment, more labels, or multiple sectors of labels, or varied communication time. So finally, many thanks to my collaborator, Josh Nunley, and our PI, Eduardo, and thank you all for your attention.